What?
Or do they know? Do they different money to people who had nothing and people who whatever you're talking about?
All right. So that must be a sign to get started. So you're all here for the Bitcoin presentation, right? I said that last night. People are like, huh? Anyway. So we're probably going to run about 40 minutes tops on this. This really is basic estate planning, right? And I'm not an attorney, but I've been on a lot of estate planning teams, so I know what the basics are. So I'll give you kind of like the basic stuff that we see every day, stuff you should do, like how to title your assets so they don't go to probate, how to title your accounts so they don't go to probate, and then maybe talk about trust and stuff like that. I'll give you an example of people like Michael Jackson and Florence Griffith Joyner, people who didn't do what they were supposed to do, and how their estates are still in probate today. We'll talk about that stuff. All right? So for 30 years, I've been working with people in a financial advisory capacity. A lot of folks from different walks of life, not all of them wealthy. So estate planning is not just for the wealthy, in case you thought that was the case. It really isn't the case. It really is more about what happens to your stuff when you die, right? Or am I moving around too much for you? Or what happens when you're incapacitated? What if you get hurt and you can't talk? Do you want to be resuscitated or do you not want life-saving measures, right? If you're a Jehovah's Witness, do you want to receive an infusion or do you not? Those sorts of things. So that would be like a healthcare proxy would be someone, in addition to that, a healthcare proxy would be someone who you would say can make decisions for you if you can. So that's part of estate planning. We'll talk about that. And then also a power of attorney, why it might make sense to have a POA for your financial issues that you have, all right? And then a trust. If you have someone in your household who has a special need, you may want to put assets in a trust for them, right? So that they then can still qualify for governmental benefits and have the trust as assets for lifestyle. So basic stuff, I won't go too deep into it. I'm not an attorney, we're not setting up trusts or estates right now, but at least I'll give you kind of the terminology you'll need and the vernacular to know to make proper decisions. Yes, sir, hey, Matt. And if you have questions along the way, stop me, all right? So again, the basics, I'll talk about the planning, something we call the high five, things like making sure you have a well-crafted will, not just a will, but a well-crafted will. A living will, healthcare proxy, power of attorney, and a trust, and I'll talk about those. Talk about how to title your accounts, joint title with rights of survivorship, as opposed to tenants in common and what that means, right? I'm not really going to spend time on protection planning. That's more of the insurance part of this. Remember, Voya, like the rest of the world, is an insurance organization, so they want me to talk about protection planning. I'm not really going to spend a whole lot of time there. But then I'll give you the examples I talked about. Michael Jackson, Florence Griffith Joyner, Prince is another one whose estates are still not settled. I'll talk about that. And we'll talk about how to get help with your stuff. All right? Sound fair? Mm-hmm. Any questions before I start? Any examples? No. All right, captive audience. So what is it, right? As I say, if you have children or loved ones, you really want to plan for them if you die. Has anyone been involved in a situation where you had a parent die or someone's parents died or a loved one, and you see what happens when they're gone? I think it was my mother-in-law when her mother died. My mother-in-law and her sister, who had been very close until that time, became suddenly not very close because no one said where the assets were going to go. So you can solve that by having a will, right, where you dictate who gets the assets when you die. So it really is about transitioning your assets to loved ones and making their life easier when you pass, right? Things like life insurance. That's another piece where you may have an old life insurance policy. A lot of folks forget that stuff, but that's an asset, and you'll have a named beneficiary for that. So we'll talk about how you title that stuff. Pensions, real estate, cars. If you own real estate, right, what happens when you die? Right? If you're married, you own property as joint title with rights of survivorship. That means if I die, my wife gets everything. But that's not always the case. You could own it tenants in common, where if I die, she gets her half, my half goes to my beneficiaries. So you want to make sure you know how all of your assets, your cars, your houses are all titled. It makes a very large difference in terms of your estate. All right. Let me go on a little bit deeper. I won't go too heavily into this stuff, but why is it needed? Well, again, you want to care for your family, right? Maintain family harmony. That's a big issue. I mean, I've seen it maybe 4 or 5 times. And it's terrible to see, but so if you can avoid it, a will would help you avoid that sort of stuff. We talk about the cost of wills. I've worked with a lot of attorneys over the years. You know, a simple will, maybe $1,000. To the more complex will, maybe $5,000, right? But so there's a value there that I think you could benefit from, your family could benefit from.
What determines the complexity? What determines my complexity?
Sure. So if you have, say if you have what they call a blended family, maybe you're divorced, you have children from a prior relationship, or if you have businesses, right, you have different partnerships or LLCs, that's a little more complex, right? But so a little bit more of like the vernacular. If you die in this state without a will, you're considered intestate. It's important to know, right? So if you don't have a will, your assets, if you don't have a beneficiary named, will go through probate. That means the judge determines where your assets go. That may or may not be what you want to do, but you can certainly avoid it, and we'll give you some examples of how to do it. Does that make sense? All right, you guys are good. It's easy. I did this to attorneys in New Jersey last Thursday, and they thought, well, I don't know if I understand that concept, so feel free to ask me if there's something you don't get. Anyone here give gifts? The gift tax exclusion, that's up to $18,000 this year. So that's, again, you can give $18,000 to as many people as you want without paying a gift tax on it. Here are the basics. And this seems like it's very rudimentary, but getting organized, knowing where your stuff is. I give the example of my father, who's 85 years old. I finally got him to do a will about 5 years ago. Did a great will. I know he has no idea where it is. So he's organized, but we don't know where it is. So, right? Terminology, I'll give you more of the terminology. If you're a testator, you're the person creating the will, who a beneficiary is, who a custodian might be, and why that's important. Also, it's important to build your team of people you're working with. An accountant, if you have a business need, an attorney, right? Loved ones, you'll also see funeral director as someone on your team. Seems a little nuts, but my in-laws have prepaid for their funeral already, so it can make sense. That could be $20,000 to $30,000, right? Stop me if it doesn't make sense along the way. And it's not just for the wealthy, obviously. Documents. This is a good one. So where do you all keep your important documents? Where do you keep yours, Matt?
Everywhere. Computer, paper.
Yeah.
But I do have a little collapsible folder that has some stuff.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Have a safe deposit box.
Safe deposit box, yeah. So what happens if you die, who can access your safe deposit box?
My son.
Your son has the codes to it, okay. That's good, I don't have that. I have a fireproof safe at home, right? But so the question then becomes, all right, if something happens to me, who can access it? They're gonna have to rent a jackhammer and all sorts of stuff. But at least that's where it all is. But you put your card in there, marriage certificates, right? Birth certificates, property titles, deeds to property, registration, if you're in the military, DD-214, that's your honorable discharge paperwork, and any other documents with regards to loans that you may have, right? And I'll leave that up for a sec. And there's more stuff. Bank account information, right? Remember, so I have 2 sons, they're 25 and 26. And when my wife and I travel together, we have something I call a catastrophe folder. In that folder lists all the accounts that they should be aware of, right? And also what the contact numbers are for those companies for life insurance and things like that. So your bank accounts, your 401k plan information, if you have an HSA, and or brokerage accounts. You want that information in there. Anybody still have stock certificates? I haven't seen one in 30 years. Or maybe the old Series EE savings bonds. I still have those. But all that stuff you want to put someplace because if it's burned up, it's gone, right? They don't give those out anymore, by the way. Now they're only electronic. Yeah. And any insurance policies. I say that a lot because I've seen over the years where people have insurance policies and they've forgotten about it. And they don't know what they have. And think about it. Insurance, if you paid into it, it's a tax-free benefit for your beneficiaries. It's a tremendous benefit, right?
So, question. So, a lot of jobs nowadays, they give you an insurance policy as part of the benefits. But then I think about it, I don't think I've ever printed that out to have somewhere. Is that something I probably should do?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably, if it's through the employer, usually it's a term policy.
Okay.
And it may go away when you leave that employer, unless you buy a permanent policy that's attached to it.
Yeah.
But I would definitely check into it.
Okay.
And I'll talk about beneficiaries in a minute, but you want to make sure you update your beneficiaries. I have a situation where I had a client who had been married for 10 years in Australia, divorced the first wife, was living here for 20 years, was married for 10. He died. He had about 1.3 million in his retirement account. 7 days after he died, his first wife contacted me because he'd never changed his beneficiary to his new wife. So the first wife had everything. Now that's how it goes, right? So just make sure you update your beneficiary, whether you're divorced, remarried. Usually younger people put mom and dad on, they forget to take them off. So those are things you want to do. Remember, if you have the online accounts, where do you keep your passwords? Where do you all keep your passwords to your online stuff?
Excel.
Excel? Yeah.
In the head.
In the head?
Point, pass away.
I have so many. I think most people I talk to have it in a little pad that they put in a drawer someplace, right? On your phone.
I guess it's through my email.
Yeah.
It's like encrypted.
But think about that. So this is all about who can access it if you can't, right? How do you give them access to that stuff? So important to think about that. And that's what this whole program is. Things to think about when you look at your own estate planning. Not how to build a trust or anything like that, but what goes into estate planning. And here it is. So you're the person who makes a will. I would suggest if you don't have a will, please do one. It's very helpful. A beneficiary, so on your retirement accounts like 401k, IRA, pensions, and insurance policies, you can name a beneficiary. What's important about that is when you name a beneficiary, that supersedes any will that you have. So it goes directly to the beneficiary. Very important. Very important financial planning tool.
Frank,
Yes?
those beneficiary designations, do those have to go through probate
No.
so they can go direct?
Exactly, and that's the benefit. And the other benefit of that, in terms of avoiding probate, if you're a private person, probate's public, so I can go on right now and see what's going on in probate. In fact, I see my neighbors 2 doors down are going through an issue, so I looked them up. So if you don't want it to be in the papers, you go and name a beneficiary to avoid probate.
And that's the same with the bank account?
Yes.
The transfer on death?
Transfer on death for bank accounts and brokerage accounts. A lot of people forget that. If you have a brokerage account, we have investments, make sure it's titled transfer on death. That way it doesn't go to probate if you die. Right? The executor or executrix, this is important. So, think about that. Before you ask someone to be your executor, make sure that they're willing and capable. I've been dealing with an executive trustee now for 12 years, and she absolutely hates doing it. She would rather not, but her colleague chose her about 15 years ago, and she would really rather not do it. So, if it's a family member or someone else, make sure it's someone who you think really cares about doing that stuff. A conservator, in that case, is someone appointed by the court, probate court, right? And you see the custodian and the guardian. Guardian and custodian are important, especially if you have someone who's underage or unable to conduct their own affairs. All right, all of which you can dictate in your will who does what for you and avoid having the court determine that.
So I have a question. If you name an executor but you don't name the other stuff, then that person decides versus the conservator, which is appointed by court.
Yeah. So if you die, the executor is going to do everything to help settle your estate. Yeah. Good question.
Question, you said you have a will
Yep,
and you have beneficiaries.
Yes.
Beneficiaries precede the will.
yes, yep. So even if you say in your will, give this to Joe, but David's your beneficiary, it's going to go to David.
What if your beneficiary says 50% of this person, 50% of that person, but your will says this goes to this person?
It goes according to the beneficiary designation.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Well, with the will though, is that filed in probate?
So probate will look at the will, right? But the beneficiary is going to go right to the beneficiary.
How does probate know you have a will?
Well, it depends. If someone shows up and says, hey, I think my mother has a will, the probate court might say, let's see the will, right? Let's see what kind of assets there are. So, because how are they going to know otherwise that you've determined which way it should go, right? Yes.
There's one thing you didn't have on there, on the slide before that.
Yeah.
A guardian, and then there's guardian of the estate of a minor.
Yep.
So it's not automatic that a minor would get whatever the person has if they're under 18 years old,
Right.
unless probate names a guardian of the estate.
That's right. That's
So,
right.
you might wanna-
So you could name a custodian in that case. So if you have underage children, it would behoove you to name a custodian, right, who could conduct their affairs should you pass away.
Right.
That's the way you avoid that.
Forget that, because
Yep, that's a good point.
18, they assume it's okay, but
Yep.
probate, and insurance companies won't acknowledge it either.
Right. That's a good point. And by the way, when you name a beneficiary who's underage, the same scenario applies. They'd have to have a custodian because they're not old enough to conduct their own affairs, right? So if you name a son or a daughter or a grandson or granddaughter, if they're not 18 or over, then again, they need a custodian. And who do you trust to do that?
No, the beneficiary one, I've never seen it.
Never seen what? No. No, but what will happen is if you die, right, and they'll call in and say, okay, she's dead, I want to collect my benefit. The insurance company or the employer will say, okay, are you of age? If you're not, do you have a custodian? And if you
So
don't,
they would just say, this is my custodian.
yeah. Yeah, because we can't, right, you have to be,
Probate has to name a guardian.
if you haven't named a custodian, the probate will name a guardian. So you can avoid that by naming it yourself, right? But think of it this way. So if you're not 18, you can't contract.
Then how are you,
You have to contract.
how are you going to do that on the form, if there's no place on the form to say this is custodian?
No, it's not on that form, right? So you name the child.
Name the child's beneficiary.
Then-
Separate document.
Separate document.
Create the custodian. Yep. Good question. That's good. Make sense? All right.
Okay, so I have a question. So if you have your beneficiary of something,
Yeah.
is a trust that you set up,
Okay.
that doesn't go through probate.
Right. It does not.
Right.
Because it's a named beneficiary.
Right.
That's right. And I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on residual rate tax. I don't think that's really relevant to this. I want to stay more 1,000 feet, if it's okay with you guys. So this is interesting. So this is the team now. Granted, I work for Voya. They're my broker-dealer. So they put Voya at the very top. I don't know that I agree that the advisor should be at the top of the pyramid, but usually the attorney, right, and the accountant, sometimes a trust. If you have a trust officer, right? I have a trust. My youngest son has spastic cerebral palsy, which affects his muscles. So I have a special needs trust for him. And he's in grad school. He's fine sometimes, mentally. But in the event that he ever needed some sort of governmental assistance, the trust will shield the assets from the governmental assistance, right? And the funeral director. I never thought about that until my mother-in-law and father-in-law did that in their estate plan. Have a funeral prepaid so you're not hit with that expense upon your death, right? A little morbid, but that's part of the planning process. So. And just really the basics. Whenever you talk to an attorney, if you have an attorney draft your will, ask them if that's what they specialize in. I've come across a lot of attorneys who do real estate closings, and they're not estate, right, or trust attorneys. So ask what their specialty is. And I'm never afraid to ask people what they do and why I should use them versus someone else. All right, what else? Simple will. Now, this data is from 2022. I would inflate that by 20% since that time, at least, right? So $300 to $1,000, and that's if you do something online. Like, I think you can go, not LegalZoom, but there's other stuff online where you can print it off for about $300 or so.
I just want to know, like, the company that I worked for previously, they actually had, just like you can increase, get, what's that special insurance or whatever, the secondary insurance, you could also pay for, like, it was just something like $10 to $20 a month for legal fees.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't
Yeah.
realize that
Yeah.
until, I guess, the year before I was deciding I was leaving.
Uh-huh.
But I was able to, I got it for that short period of time, realized what it was, but still want to leave before I could use it. And I was
Yeah.
able to extend it 1 year, and that was maybe like $200, and I got my will and my trust.
That's nice.
Returning or whatever. So
That's a great benefit. That's a great benefit. Yeah, and they can do that because they have, large numbers that they're paying in there. But that's a tremendous benefit. I like that a lot.
So you might have that.
Yeah, right. If you're employed, if you're working for a large organization, you might.
I've signed up for it.
It's benefit.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, that's a good one though. I like that a lot. That's a great benefit. Legal fees. I mean, if you've ever hired an attorney, $100 to $400 depends upon what kind of work they're doing for you.
That's outside the will? You mean in addition to the cost
So,
of the will?
that's if you have them doing some additional work, right, on top of the will. My in-laws did a will. They live in Rhode Island. It cost them $4,000. So, but they were somewhat, not very, but somewhat complicated, right?
Of course, they were in-laws. They were in-laws. So they were your in-laws.
Well, they still
Of
are.
course they were complicated.
They're still living. They're still living, but it's an interesting story. But document preparation, document storage, right? So we talked about wherever you store this stuff, if something happens to you, who can access it? That's important. And I'm going to talk about healthcare proxy and like a do not resuscitate order. But what happens, and we don't want to think about this, but it happens. What if you get incapacitated? Then what? Who knows where your stuff is, right? So here's a high five. This is, if you ever took a picture of anything, this is kind of what we say is important, right? It's not just having a will, but a well-crafted will, which dictates exactly what you want to happen, right? A living will, again, that's if I'm still alive but I can't talk, or something's happened to me in the hospital, don't give me blood, resuscitate me, don't. That's what I want to happen. A healthcare proxy, if I can't talk, Natalie's going to be my proxy and tell the doctors what I want to happen. And then powers of attorney. When my brother was stationed in Germany years ago, I was his power of attorney in the States because he wasn't here in the States. And then a trust. If you have things you want to put in the trust to maybe dictate how they're spent, right? Or you may want to avoid a higher tax bracket. I'm not talking about taxes, but if you want to avoid higher taxes, you may utilize a trust for something like that. Make sense? All right, cool. But you can do it yourself. I mean, all this stuff you can do. You can find stuff online or go to an attorney if it makes sense. Right? Let me just show you. If you have any questions about what these are, the will, the living will, the healthcare proxy. Anybody here have a healthcare proxy? Wow, look at that. See? You guys are ahead of the game. Wow. And then power of attorney. I've seen them come in handy when, again, someone's out of state, they can't contract, the POA can do it for you.
Is there,
Oh, I'll leave it up.
is there a time limit around the power of attorney? So so in my situation with my mom, the one that she signed was like 2008.
Yeah,
So because of her issues now, we still my sister gives that one out.
still have it.
I give it out, and they seem to take it. So
Yeah.
I'm assuming there's no time limitation.
I don't know, Matt, I've seen some raggedy, rolled up, crumpled up stuff from 25 years ago.
Okay.
So I've never seen it contested.
Yeah.
But, and that's something I should say. And all this stuff, I've seen maybe twice in the last 25 years where there was a will and some of the other beneficiaries contested it. They thought, well, my father wasn't in the right mind, so they could always contest the will. But again, you protect yourself at the first level by having it, right? Anyone have a need for a special needs trust for a family member? You do. So again, it's, if you have that, money goes in there. It doesn't qualify against them for governmental benefits. So they can then still receive governmental benefits like Medicaid and have assets to live a decent life. It's a little complicated, but it's a tool we use every now and then, especially for parents who have children with autism who probably can't ever live on their own. So it's beneficial. So here it is. Where are your records, right? Are they in the safe deposit box? If so, who can get there? Where's the key? My father's stuff, I don't know. It's probably in a drawer someplace, I'm sure, but he's got it. And then, or is it on a computer? If so, where are the passwords? How do you access it? So again, basic stuff. But you know, I find when we do this presentation, people are like, "Yeah, you know, I hadn't thought about that. It's something I can really use." So that's the benefit of this stuff. Now, yes.
Related to the document storage, so I did this for my parents.
Yeah.
Even though they didn't realize it, because they like to give you a bulk of papers. I'm not, so I went and scanned all of it,
Right.
and then I sent it to my sister as well, and I did that also with my stuff.
Yeah.
So would that, because the thing here is you're going to lose the paper.
Right.
Are they going to take the scan? Because that's the question. Would there be any reason for them not to?
I don't see why there'd be a reason not to. I mean,
That's,
they take copies which are black and white,
Okay.
right? So it doesn't have to be blue ink.
okay.
So that's a good question, though.
Yes, and I just want to say, being a nursing home administrator,
Right, so you know this
a
stuff.
ton of times,
Yeah.
people don't take care of this kind of
Yep.
thing. Somebody has a stroke,
Yep.
mom has a stroke, and then all of a sudden, nobody knows where anything is.
Exactly.
She's incapacitated, and then the fight starts.
That's exactly right.
One of this, she would have went and done that. She would have, you know, mom this, mom that. And so it is a big deal
It's a big deal.
for people to
Yeah.
think about these things. And it's not morbid, it's just life.
It's just life. I mean, I've seen it with my in-laws. I won't say my parents, but my in-laws. Yeah, the two sisters were very close until their mother died, and all of a sudden, you know, the world was broken up.
I have seen so many situations like that, and it's unfortunate because as soon as dollar signs,
Right.
maybe auntie had something and people this one can't come in to see my aunt, she's near death,
Yeah.
we don't want her this, we don't. It's really a very, so it's nice to just have a family huddle
Right.
and talk
Right.
about these
Exactly.
things and make sure that everybody gets their thoughts out and then
Yep.
decide what people are going to do.
A family meeting, right? Get them all on the same page and hash it out before something happens. Yeah, that's great advice. I wish my father would do that, but he hasn't done that. He hasn't, and there's 5 of us. And I'm the youngest, so we'll see what happens.
One thing, Frank, that I've been seeing is happening in my family. It's not there yet, but I think other families are starting to do it. They still have family reunions.
Right.
They're starting to carve out time to talk about that stuff.
That's a good idea.
It ain't the greatest,
Yeah,
you know, it ain't the greatest assembly going on.
Right.
But I think that is one way
that's a good idea.
to bring people to the table. You know, put
Yeah.
my family, put the drinking down for
Right, do it before the food comes out.
Right, exactly.
Yep.
And then even if it's an hour,
That's a great idea.
talking about it.
I should build something where families can, it's a good idea. All right. So I want to talk about this, though. This is important to me. So titling and beneficiaries. So I'll give you an example. So in the state of Connecticut, most real estates own joint title with rights of survivorship, right? Typically.
Right.
But it could be tenants in common. But so what if you own assets? Say if I alone own my house, I'm married, I have 2 boys. If I die, right, it doesn't go automatically to my spouse at 100%. So what happens is, if we're not joint title on the property, the spouse gets the first $100,000 of my estate. So let's say the estate's worth $1 million. She gets the first $100,000. The remainder is divided half between her and half between my surviving children, right? So unless you title it properly, the spouse won't get 100% of what you have. Or another example is when you're divorced, you have kids from your prior marriage. Same deal, the spouse gets the first $100,000, then half of the remainder of the estate. Third situation I'll give you is, what if you die and you have no kids, but you have parents who are surviving? Spouse gets the first $100,000, the remainder, the $900,000 if it's $1 million, 3/4 goes to your spouse, a quarter goes to your parents, right? So unless you title the assets joint title with rights of survivorship, it's going to go other than to your spouse 100%. So, and here it is, joint title with rights of survivorship, tenants in common, kind of a quirky thing. Happens a lot, I think, out west. They own real estate out there like that, but if I die, my portion stays on my side, and the other person's portion stays on their side, right? Make sense? All right. So here it is, the beneficiary designation supersedes your will. All right, so here it is, ways to avoid probate. We talked about having your accounts entitled transfer on death or payable on death, right? So POD, TOD for a brokerage account. I have a lot of clients who didn't, when I bring their brokerage accounts over, they're seldom titled TOD. They just don't know. It's not something that's, for some reason, talked about. All right? Yep.
So on your brokerage account, you should have
TOD.
transfer death.
Yeah, unless it's an IRA, right, in which case you have a named beneficiary. But if it's just a after-tax brokerage account,
Oh, okay.
TOD.
Don't you name a beneficiary for that?
No, on your IRA you would.
So as long, you can put your trust as your beneficiary.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yep, yep, yep. Even your cars, and I just thought about this the other day. My car is only in my name, so if I die, it's going to go through probate. So I have to retitle it so that it goes to my wife upon my death. I'm not planning on dying, but
How does one do that? You have to go to the motor vehicle?
I think, yeah, I have to go online and double check. I think it's through, you probably have to do it online to request a new title, but that's something to do, right? But POD and TOD is important. And if it's an IRA, you will have already named the beneficiary, but if it's not, it's a TOD designation. All right? And just remember to update that stuff when your life changes, you have children who move out, you get remarried, or you grow up and your parents are no longer your beneficiaries, that sort of stuff. Just know when to do that. All right? And more on TOD. And if you have a minor as a TOD, remember they have to have a custodian. It's very important. All right, so there's a question here about your last income tax. Remember, you still pay taxes, right? So if you die, you still have to pay taxes for that year when you're deceased. Or if you're taking required minimum distributions for the IRS, now you're age 72 or over, you still have to take your required minimum distribution for the year in which you die. So that stuff doesn't go away.
What?
So if you have a retirement account,
If you're dead, they're really gonna.
so yeah, the RMD has to come out of your accounts because the IRS wants their taxes. It's got to come out.
Well, because you're going to file your taxes the next year for the year that you died in.
Yeah, so right. So if you died in 2024, and if you're over 72, your requirement for that year has to come out for that year. Even if it comes out in next year, you got to take it out for the year 2024. So.
And like Social Security and pension,
Yeah.
your kids have to let them know right away that you're dead, so you don't keep getting money and then they come after.
Actually,
It depends.
the director tells them that. They tell them that quick.
Yeah, they're pretty good about that.
The hospital tells them that. They're the fastest people to have them checked.
Yeah,
You know that, right? I mean, they are the fastest.
they are quick about it.
Security's really good at that.
That, by the way, there's a great presenter from Social Security in New York City. She'll come up and do a presentation if everyone did that.
On Social Security?
She's really good, yeah. She's really hot stuff. Life insurance, I said I wouldn't spend much time on it. This really isn't a sales pitch. But remember, life insurance is a tax-free benefit to your beneficiaries. And the older you are when you buy it, the more expensive it is. But if you have it in place, make sure you know what you have, right? A lot of folks come up and they have these old policies from years ago with a tremendous benefit, and they're not sure what they had. So double check that stuff. Questions on this?
Do you recommend getting, I'm assuming your answer will be yes, second life insurance outside of your job?
Well, so the question is, if you leave your job, what happens?
You said earlier.
Right? What happens?
Well,
So I'm not a big life insurance person, so my philosophy is to buy term insurance and invest the difference. Term insurance is the cheapest, but that's my approach. Others may think otherwise, right? Some people try to sell you a whole life policy, which is an investment vehicle. I don't necessarily agree with that. I'm not spending time on life insurance. I'm going to go right by it. It's just not exciting to talk about. So it really isn't. I'd rather talk about investments. But so make time now, review your I mean, hopefully this is helpful, right? Make time to look at all of your stuff. Look at what you have. Look at how it's titled. Look at where you have your documents. Can people get to them? Can they read what's in there? Right? Failure to fund the trust, I'll talk about that. But so you set up a trust, you pay a couple $1,000s for it. If you don't fund it, what's the point of having it, right? So some examples of people who did wrong. Now, I never really followed Heath Ledger, but he was an actor. I think he played Batman at one time. All right.
The Joker.
The Joker. All right. So he died in 2008, and that went by like that. One daughter, right, Matilda Rose, he drafted the documents before she was born, named his siblings, but never updated it. So Matilda Rose is out. So he never updated his information, you see? So that's part of the problem. So even if you document it, you want to update your stuff. Because Matilda Rose, hopefully his siblings helped her out, but who knows? Human beings can be cruel. Yeah. Right? So he didn't review his estate planning documents. Michael Jackson. If you know Michael's situation, it is tragic. But the 3 kids, he built the trust but didn't fund it. His estate is still open today through probate. He never funded the trust. Probably didn't have good advice along the way. Everybody had their hand out, and they weren't likely helping him, so that's just how it goes, you know? One more example, James Gandolfini, right? The Sopranos. He didn't know he was going to die when he was on vacation, but he did. So what happened? His estate paid 55% in taxes. So the max for the federal level is 40%. He paid another, 15% in estate taxes. It's unbelievable. So you want to avoid that. And by the way, I don't think he had a healthcare proxy in place. I don't know that it mattered. I think he went pretty rapidly. But that's important to think about, right? And then FloJo, if you guys remember her, right? We all do. So you see, so she had done all the stuff, but no one could find it. They couldn't find it anyplace. So the court said she didn't have one. That's what happens, right? So just some rough examples, but they're real examples. Keep it in a secure place where you can find it. And the last one, so I never really knew who this guy was, but I've heard his name a little bit. Another performer, I think. But he didn't build a trust for his children. He should have. Probably had a lot of assets. So didn't do what he was supposed to do. In any event, this says get professional help if you have these, but it makes sense to get professional help anyway, right? Talk to an attorney or at least go online to some of the legal planning software and put something in place, because something's better than nothing. I've seen so many situations where people failed to plan, and then what happens, right? 3 months later, still in probate, and the family's struggling to pay. First of all, they're grieving. They're trying to pay funeral expenses, trying to pay off the car loan before it gets repossessed, and do all this stuff. So make it easy for your descendants if you pass. Here it is. So, see, again, first bullet point, again, void as a financial institution. So, number 1, I don't know if that matters, but get your team together. Your high 5 documents, anybody remember what they are? A well-crafted will. Wow, nice. Look at that. Remember your beneficiaries, though, very important. I have a lot of examples of mostly men who forget to update it, and then the prior wife comes in, and that's it. So, and an efficiency analysis just means look at everything you have, and do you have it properly positioned? Is it protected? And have you named the right people in case you die? Right? So, that is that. What questions do you have?
One thing, how soon does the life insurance come through? Because you mentioned final expenses. family should have to deal with that?
It depends on the company and the type of policy, but it's pretty quick. I mean, it's not going to take months. So,
Because I've been hesitating to pay for like cremation and everything. Because like my mother paid for a cremation and crest in Seattle.
in advance,
And we just,
Yeah.
we just couldn't, so that money was lost.
right?
So I'm hesitating to do that in advance. But if
So
you can get
it's-
the insurance money really quick.
Yeah, it's pretty quick. I mean, they'll verify, so certificate of death, and typically death claims, that's the units that do this stuff, they pay out pretty rapidly. Yeah.
And who exactly needs trust? Who needs to look at trust? Basically, on anything you own, you can just title it correctly. Huh?
put it in
And
the-
that just eliminates probate.
Yeah, so if you, right, so for example, the transfer on death, that'll avoid probate, right?
So I can go to Bank of America and say, I want to do a transfer upon death document.
Yep, yep. Yep.
So I'm always confused on once you pass, and you have debt with this credit card, car loans, can whoever you designated, can they just pay that off, or does that have to go through the court process to identify what debts you have?
So what I've,
How's it gonna get paid?
what I've seen is the person who's named in the will has taken care of all that.
Okay.
It's paid off.
Okay.
I was thinking of my cousin died, he was in someplace in South America, was 45 years old, and he had a lot of credit card debt and car loans.
Yeah.
His mother was the executor. Yeah, she paid everything off.
Okay.
How do they know? I mean,
Where to find it?
I have a feeling people aren't going to go looking for the credit card. So
Yeah.
how do you get that resolved? Does the credit card bill?
So the bills are coming in, right?
Yeah, the bills are coming in. You know, so-
And then they're going to call next of kin to find out where you are if you haven't paid the bill.
Okay, so they'll go in.
They'll know. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Always be responsible for, as a next of kin, for those outstanding debts.
no, you're not. No, you're not responsible for it.
State is responsible.
The estate is, but you're probably gonna work as next of kin. You'll probably work on it.
What if there's no estate? What if there's like
No money.
no money?
No money to pay for the bills, then they'll just charge it off, and that's it. Charge off. It's all right.
You're not gonna hunt me down.
In the grave?
But my mama's debt.
No, no, but you know what they could do? They could file a lien against the estate for the proceeds.
What estate?
So if there were an estate,
They go home.
so if no home, there's nothing. They can't get blood from the stone, right?
But then somebody would have to make a designation that there was no assets, right? I mean, it's not like
Yeah.
you just, Bank of America doesn't just take your word that you don't have.
No, they
Probate would have to say there's no assets. Everybody's talking about
Yeah.
avoiding probate, but there's a point
Right.
at which if you don't have a trust and you don't have a will in Connecticut, you got to go somewhere.
it's going to go through. If you don't have a will, it'll go through probate.
Yeah, you have to.
Absolutely.
Go through probate, so.
So have a will, designate your beneficiaries, right?
Okay, so quite honestly, I'm just going to put it out there. You might know her, you might not, but I'm just going to put it out there. She's got debt. She owns no home. She does not have a will. She dies, what happens?
And her bank accounts are not joint accounts, they're just in her name only?
Bank accounts are all in her name.
Just her name only?
One, that's in my name too. Okay, tell me about it.
Well, right, you have something to do tomorrow.
For real.
Your bank accounts, as soon as you die, you can't access your bank account.
Right,
But her name's on.
But my name's on it.
Yeah, she's a joint.
Unless.
Yeah,
Right, joint accounts.
but her name was on it,
Her name.
so it's her asset as well.
Right.
They can come after that.
Right. So they would come after me because my name's on her account and she owes debt. She owes
Well,
debt.
they would come after her accounts, and your name happens to be on there.
Okay, so she has accounts that are not worth the value. Obviously, she wouldn't have the debt. They were not worth the value of the debt that she has. They're like not worth the value. They'll take what's there and still look for the rest.
I would say, yeah. I mean, right, that's what they do. They're not in the business of taking losses.
So her best, right, so her best bet is not to have me on these accounts.
Well, but why? Your mom's still alive, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So if she has debt and she dies,
Passwords and stuff.
doesn't matter whether it's in your name or not.
Well, she wouldn't be responsible for her.
Yeah, you're not responsible for it. But if your name is on there, it doesn't matter. If her name and your name are on there, that's still her asset. They'll still pursue it, regardless of whether you're on there or not.
So they're gonna ask me for it, and I'm gonna say what?
That's the point. It shouldn't be a substantial amount of money account. That's an account.
Okay, I want to just use numbers. She has, let's say she has $10,000, which is
Yeah.
not a lot. $10,000 of debt, she's got $2,000 in an account.
Okay? They'll take it.
They'll take the 2,000.
Yep.
Will they look for the balance
If she has other assets,
named on the?
no, they can't pursue you.
Not on there
No, you're not a co-signer. You're not a co-signer in that way.
unless you're
Yeah.
co-signing that car.
They're just taking the whole 2,000 from you.
So if I'm co-signer on cards and accounts, you're not, I'm not paying.
You would remember if you co-signed.
Are you sure? This is years ago. My mother's had me co-sign a bunch of things in life, so who knows what
Well, so,
she has? I don't know.
they would just come, they would take whatever they can get, right? They have departments that specialize in this stuff.
Take any of what I have.
No,
As long as your name ain't on it.
right.
Well, but if you're the co-signer on a car,
Okay.
then,
No, her car's paid off.
I know, but just for an example, and you were, and she died. Yes, they would be asking you because you agreed to pay.
Yeah, if you co-sign, sure.
Debt. I mean, people
Yep.
can't walk around and go, well, that person's
Co-signers on
dead.
credit cards and co-signers on debt.
I think when you co-sign
Any debt.
that, you're going to be responsible, because that's what it
You're
means.
equally responsible.
I'll be responsible if that other person
So I
can't
need to
pay.
ask a big.
You got to get your name on it.
Co-sign, that's
So she was very careful, I mean, she's very careful about a lot of things
Yeah,
to make sure that I'm not on it, so I'm not responsible.
yeah.
But I'm not so sure we ever thought about co-signing on
Right.
credit cards or being on her account and being a co-signer on her bank account?
Well, that's different. Yeah, but if you co-sign debt, then you're also responsible.
If something happens.
You know, one thing I saw for my, so my father-in-law has some form of Parkinson's. For him to qualify for Medicaid, they had to spend down all their assets. So what happened was, even though we're being recorded, the attorney said to my mother-in-law, take all of your assets, put them into a loan to your daughters. Therefore, it's no longer her asset, it's a loan to her daughters, whereas the daughters are paying her back. So that no longer counts as an asset, so he then qualifies for Medicaid.
But I thought,
Wait, let's.
No, that's a transfer of assets. This isn't a transfer of assets, it's a loan.
So what's this
The
thing?
attorneys crafted it.
Okay, tell me about this.
So,
Transfer.
so as a loan, she didn't transfer the assets, but it's a loan given to her daughters. This is it. So these attorneys in Rhode Island crafted this, where, so my in-laws didn't qualify for Medicaid for my father-in-law. So they had, say, $500,000-$600,000, whatever. They said, the attorney said, here's what we'll do. We'll create a loan where you, Dorothy, loaned this $600,000 to your daughters. It's no longer your asset. And you didn't transfer the assets to them, but it's a loan. So they're repaying her that loan. The asset no longer is in her bank account. It's just loan repayments coming in.
Okay. How long? I know.
A year.
Attorney. So.
Yeah. So, no, they charge $15,000 for that, but
Well, make them.
it's worth it. Think about it. Like, what's the cost of a semi-private room for a year? What's the cost of a semi-private room for a year?
15,000.
$15,000 for the year? All right, yeah.
Assets and loans.
Is there
Hey.
an attorney in Connecticut or Illinois that you know?
I don't know. These folks are out of Rhode Island.
Yeah, I can't bring another state into it. But,
Yeah.
so basically they did a loan against the asset.
So they took the assets, put it into a loan, and then they loaned that to the surviving daughters. So it no longer counts as an asset for her parents. Very interesting.
But isn't there a point where the parent can loan something to their child and then they can forgive a part of the loan up to $10,000
That may,
every
yeah.
year?
I'm not familiar with that.
18,000, you can give 18,000.
That's a gift. Yeah, the gift is $18,000.
Forgive
Yeah.
it, so that's the gift. You were
Yeah.
saying they were paying it back.
No, they are-
I'm saying
so-
they could forgive it, and that person doesn't pay it back for purposes of qualifying under medical.
So they're paying it back to her.
Right, no, I know, but
Yeah.
I think isn't there enough?
Yeah, but so it's no longer her asset. So she doesn't have that $600,000 asset
Right.
to work with. So I'd never heard of it until a year ago when the attorneys put it together. So it's interesting.
So would this be an estate
What's that?
planning to determine?
Yeah. Yeah. What's that?
That is interesting.
Yeah, because you're right, you can't, if you transfer assets, there's a 5-year look back, right? You can't hide the assets.
Right, I'll pay $5 or 15 minutes at the end of class.
Another set of questions.
So, but that's just an example I thought was kind of neat.
Okay, maybe $15 transfer assets.
What else?
Do banks have a policy where they won't notarize a will?
Yeah, I heard that. Because the will, at least here, doesn't have to be notarized, just witnessed.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So there was a bank officer at my dad's will. They just said they wouldn't notarize it.
Yeah.
They would witness it but not notarize it. So,
I went to my bank and I think they were like, if I remember, they were like, yeah, I don't think we can notarize it or because of the type of document.
right.
Or something.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah.
But you can go to DPS and they notarize, because I had that issue. There was something, I had my mom with me and they were like, we won't do the power of attorney. So DPS.
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know.
They'll bring somebody with.
Is it Series 7 or is it 13? Probably 7. Probably Chapter 7. Where Chapter 7 bankruptcy, everything's liquidated. Or Chapter 13 where you get on a repayment plan.
You're asking the wrong person. A very unknowledgeable person. I'm like 7 or 13.
I don't know.
7,000 or 13,000?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Putting your pension into Social Security.
Yeah.
She's got debt that's high.
So what are you worried about? I
I'm
mean,
not worried about anything. I keep on telling her to file for bankruptcy. She can just live her life and not worry about spending this damn money and paying credit cards.
so there's credit card debt?
Yeah.
So what if she doesn't pay it? It's charged off. So what?
She don't need it.
So what? Yeah, it's charged off.
She's so freaking responsible to paying this damn money, and then who's paying? My sister paying her money. I'm paying her money to help her with the other
you
costs.
go.
Like, why?
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
Your life.
Market demand.
Stop paying those damn bills.
Take a charge off, right? What else? This is good. So people are talking.
But it's gotten so much better. My credit score's gotten so much better in the last 5 years. Okay, but who cares?
No,